Was good, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Podcast this week, Mitch Jones. For anybody that doesn't know who Mitch Jones is, Mitch co-produced and co-wrote my album with me. He is an absolute master keys player. He's a great producer. Also, just a very good friend of mine now, and the whole process of the album has pretty much been from me initially meeting Mitch during COVID online and building a relationship with him and a friendship, and me deciding that I would absolutely love it if he could help me write the album. So yeah, this is a bit of a conversation about how the album, bit of history of Mitch. Just yeah, I love this chat. I love Mitch. He's one of the best. So without further ado, Mitch Jones, Mr. Mitch Jones, what is cooking, my man?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good. This is weird because obviously I know you pretty well, and usually you're like sat here
Sat
next to
next to
me.
you. That's it, man. Yeah, it's weird. It is weird.
The studio's changed a lot since you've been here as well. It's
I know,
like
man. It
a
was
lot.
getting ready for Live World, right?
Yeah, man. By the time this episode comes out, the album is out.
Amazing.
So for anybody that's listening that is like, who the fuck is this Welsh Mitch Jones dude? Mitch co-wrote, co-produced the album with me, and is a genius on production and also one of the best keys player. So I wanted to get him on to kind of talk about the whole album process, talk about his life. So here he is, people, Mr. Mitch Jones.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. How do you want to do this? Let's talk about the album first.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
Well, I'm just like trying to think back to how it all started out, I guess. Me and you kind of done. I think the first session we ever did actually was like a Zoom thing.
It
I think
was with Charlene Hector.
exactly it was. It was Charlene.
During COVID.
Yeah, it could well have been, man. Yeah, so
It
it's
was.
kind of way back when, and then after that, we'd kind of started to do more in the room stuff, and kind of do bits and bobs, and then you kind of just dropped it. Really, you were like, "I want to do an album." I was like, "Right, sick. Let's do it." So yeah, it was an interesting one, because like I'd never worked on anything as the scale of actually doing like a full album of music. So there was times at the beginning where it kind of felt a little bit daunting, I guess, in the respect of like what's it going to be, like
Yeah.
what is it, that was the kind of thing that I was sort of scratching my head about, just because obviously I was like knew your music really well and loved it, but I was kind of unsure what it was gonna, how that was going to translate to an album thing. But I guess what I will say is, for me, as soon as we started to kind of, I feel like it was when I started to come down to yours, and we were really kind of getting into it properly,
Yeah.
and kind of doing back to back days and long days, in the best way, just like
Yeah.
just making tunes late into the night and hanging out, and I feel like it was in those moments where, like, I don't know whether it was the same for you, but it almost like clicked that I was like, I can see what it's going to be now. And then from that point, it was just like I just wanted to kind of throw as much energy behind it as possible, really, because I just fucking loved the music, and I was really loving coming down. Like, for people that don't know me, like my life at home, I've got a couple of kids, so like I don't really get to, at this stage anymore, whilst the kids are young, do the whole the late night thing and smash loads of days together, just because I'm trying to, I want to be around to
Be a
kind
dad.
of, this, so it was kind of a nice balance for me to actually get to like put some time in the diary where it was like, right, I'm not like trying to have one foot in both right now. I'm going to be in a different place, the family's all set at home, and I'm just going to go, and I'm going to like 100% be in the music, and that's kind of be where I'm going to be,
Yeah, because I think for me it was like April 2022. we got in your studio in Brighton, that what joyous place under the
Oh
train
man.
tracks. So Mitch had a temporary studio in Brighton, which was like a porter cabin, right?
Oh man, yeah, it was like the toilet was like outhouse in like across industrial estate, you know.
you, I
Uh,
love when we had vocalists in, and you were like, "Oh, here's a toilet roll just in case they've
oh
run out."
man, honestly, like to be fair, it was like by the end, it almost like became the acid test of like whether people were like cool to hang out was because if they were too much of a diva to use the outhouse, then it probably wasn't going to be a good working relationship. But yeah, that place used to give me anxiety, man. I can't lie. It was stressful, but actually hilariously, like some of the some actually wicked records came from those sessions, you know.
Dude,
And
like we wrote. To be fair, actually, there's only one record on the album that we wrote in those sessions, but there's like three records that we wrote that are probably going to be album two,
yeah,
and they're
right.
like absolute panty droppers.
Yeah, man. It's just funny because like yeah, it's hard. Like when I look back to that time, yeah, it was stressful, you know, like when you don't feel
Yeah,
like your kind of work environment is conducive to like you know like just running professional sessions. I think I was probably in my head a little bit more than I even needed to be about
one
it, to be
hundred percent.
honest. Everyone
Well,
was just like, it's cool, it's rough and ready, but like you got everything you need and we can work. It's fine.
well, who was the first session? It was Tommy Jules, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, man.
So,
Yeah.
so the first session was Tommy Jules on day one. So this was literally April 2022.
Right.
And then day two was Clem Douglas.
Yeah, yeah. Clem came in for a couple of days as well, I think.
Yeah, Clem did 2 days, and this was before Clem had released really any music as Clem.
Yeah, right.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure
Well, I think yeah, there was probably a couple
she'd
of
done like
it was
one.
it was like this was happening and it was just about to go stratospheric, like because she's fucking amazing, you know.
Amazing. But
Um,
I don't think I think she had like one or two releases.
yeah, right.
Because I remember what was that coffee shop down the road that we always used to go to.
Yeah, was it? I think it was called Rust,
Yeah,
maybe.
Russ, that's it.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
remember.
bougie, but yeah, it
Yeah,
was nice.
I
Yeah,
remember sitting with her having breakfast, and yeah, we were just like talking about it, and it's crazy like what came out of those sessions, and like how some of the artists that we did sessions with initially like have just like gone stratospheric
yeah,
on another
yeah.
level
It's
to the
kind of
point where we can't
crazy.
even have them on the records.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of them where I guess it's like, in a way, it's a good problem to have. I guess it's a good sign. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you're working with the right people. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, of course, it kind of makes it a little bit complicated when it comes to actually getting the records cut. But yeah, you know, yeah, it was fun, man. Like, you know, we got to do some amazing sessions with some amazing people, and like, yeah, I really love the music that came out of it. You know.
Can you remember the first session with Georgia Meek
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
I
fucking
do.
broom room
Oh
in Tower
man,
Yard?
yeah, it was like a GCSE, like a forgotten GCSE like coursework room. Like one, I think it had one speaker. I think it genuinely did
It
have
did.
a one working speaker. It's like, yeah, we're cool for mono, guys. No one needs to worry about the stereo image today. Like just the one speaker.
And she brought her
Um,
fucking dog in,
yeah, yeah.
Arrow, and it was farting all day.
Oh
And
man,
I think that was at the point where like for anybody that hasn't listened to the Georgia Meek podcast, there's go listen to it after she's on here. She's obviously the singer on Summit and Memories. But Georgia's like this massive character. And there was another girl called Lauren in the room, who was like complete polar opposite to Georgia.
yeah.
And me and Mitch just looked at each other and was like, this is going to be an interesting session.
Yeah, all like packed into this like 2x4
Tiny,
like room. Yeah, yeah,
tiny room. And the first thing we pulled out was the bag was Summit.
yeah. Right.
And realistically, that was never something that we were like, yeah, this is the one, right?
Yeah, I'd even be interested to listen to the original like demo of that, because I guess
Mm,
another thing I guess that would potentially be interesting for people to know would be like the way that a lot of these records actually came to be, like the form that they ended up on the record in, was that actually, well, for the sessions that I wasn't involved in the original writing of, we'd kind of just strip it back, right, to the
yeah.
vocals, and then almost like build it again from the bottom up. But even in this session, I would guess, I can't remember specifically, but I would imagine that if we like A B the original demo and sum it as it is on the album now, they're probably unrecognizable, bar the amazing top line, which Georgia absolutely killed.
Yeah.
But like music wise, I like I say, I can't bet because I don't remember because it's like 2.5 years ago. But I can well imagine that like whatever we were like putting down in that tiny little shoebox of a room in Tileyard, it does not resemble anywhere close to what we ended up with
Yeah.
on the track. So
Can
it's,
can you remember when we finished Summit?
I don't know. I mean, I know we did it at your place. It was down at yours where we did it.
So for me, it was we'd finished for the day, and I think we'd had dinner, and we just started listening to the Chemical Brothers
Right.
in the studio, and we hadn't even worked on Summit. We hadn't even listened to Summit,
Right.
and then we were just going through all the projects,
Yeah.
and I think we heard Summit and was like, this is like the most perfect intro record
Yeah. Right.
start. Like
Yeah.
it's just like goosebumps, but it's also like people aren't like, this needs to have something that people aren't going to expect.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think we were listening to a record. I think it was like, I can't remember. It was on like one of the Chem's like second albums, and it was all of a sudden it was like went from this like beautiful kind of music to just like absolute carnage.
Yeah. Right.
And we were just like, this is what it needs to take.
Yeah. That is a sick blueprint. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I
And,
remember. Yeah. Yeah.
and
It's
I
coming.
was and I was like, Mitch, do your thing on some like pretty chords, and then let's go ham on the drums. And I
Yeah.
found this like the grossest kick drum.
Yeah. It was. I gotta say though, man. Like those sessions for me were almost like the most fun, because I feel like like creatively we were really free.
Yeah.
There was like it was like the speed that we were working just meant that there was like such a freedom, like, and a flow to it. It was just like you were just pulling things in, and like just quite almost like random, or like, but like
Yeah.
having that very like not getting too attached to anything, like,
Mm,
right, that sounds cool, right, pull it in, right, that doesn't work, like, and I feel like those were the sessions for me where I was most like, wow, like, you know because there's nothing worse for me. The opposite end of that spectrum obviously is like, and we've all been in those sessions where we're like 5 hours in and we're agonizing over like, oh,
yeah.
is the melody right? Oh, should we? And it's like, oh man, like you've totally gone, you've gone too far, like,
Yeah.
Whereas this for me, in terms of like the creative flow, was almost like the opposite end of the spectrum. We were, and I feel like, I'm sure like artists like Fred and those guys that like do the like on the fly, like the whole like just being on a train and just like
Mm,
having a little bit more of a sort of like, not carefree, because that suggests that they don't care, but like, but not overthinking, not too
yeah.
much mind, like just like let it flow out, and like follow your instincts, I guess. And I think that's kind of what we were doing. We were just like using our ears and being like, right, does this sound cool? Like, is this a vibe? Like, we like, I remember like you'd occasionally like plug in the massive speakers at the back of your studio and like absolutely crank it. We were like, yeah, this feels good.
Yeah.
I think we're doing, we're doing the right thing here.
But I think that's the, in my opinion, like, we can get into it more on your thoughts and feelings. But for me, this is like the debut album, and everybody knows what I've done previously, right?
Mm.
And it's, for me, it's like, how do you evolve to an album version of that, if you know what I mean? I don't just want 12, 13 records of like the same kick drum, the same like arrangement, the
Yeah.
same kind of record. And
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to do that. But also it's like, how do we do something that we enjoy
Mm.
that still sounds slightly like Will Clarke, still has a slight signature sound, but
Mm.
also it's very different, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also setting the blueprint of future albums.
Mm.
And how do you because I think it's very easy, right, to, and I think this is why a lot of people don't like artists' second albums, is because we as fans go in and expect the same,
Yeah.
and you never get, or unless it's a really boring artist, you
Yeah.
never get the same.
Yeah, and even if you do get the same, then when you get it, actually, you're probably thinking, "Oh,
Wasn't
actually,
as good as that.
I didn't want that." Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's the hard thing, man. Yeah, totally. But what I would say about doing those sessions with you and like getting to know you as a musician and as a person is like, and this was kind of another aspect that was super enjoyable for me, was like, when you work with DJs, like their sort of knowledge of, and especially when it's people like you that have been doing it like properly, do you know what I mean, and for a period of time, like you've learned your craft, you've mastered the art, and you it's like what I found really enjoyable was like you just pull in like the most kind of random incredible reference that I'd never heard,
Mm,
and like that's kind of like the record bag like thing, like it's like you as a DJ, the best thing you can, I guess, do is to have a knowledge of as much incredible music as you can, and then you've got like all your paints in your palette, right, for like playing whatever kind of feel that you want to play when you're playing out, and if you the way to do that is to know a bunch of amazing music,
yeah.
and that was what was like super kind of educational for me, almost, was like being in that room, and sometimes we might get hit a moment where we'd be scratching our head, and then you'd go, oh, like, have you heard this, like, or like,
Mm,
or have you heard this, or like, check this out, like no one really knows this. And hilariously, like sometimes, and again, like without getting into like the state of the music industry and streaming, like the funny thing was you'd be looking at this record on streaming, and it would have like a ludicrously small amount of streams,
yeah,
despite it being like a piece of like arguably like electronic music genius, and like
yeah.
whatever, that's a whole different conversation. But I guess what was interesting for me was like sitting there with you and like trying to crack the code sometimes on a record that we might be working on, and like so often the thing that would unlock the end product would be like you saying, oh, like check out check out this, or like listen to this. And for me, like, I'm, again, for those that don't know me, I'm very much like, I've come from the music school, I guess. Like I went to a music school when I was a kid, studied classical piano, and then did a jazz degree on piano. So it's very much come from, like, I guess, by the book, in the sense of like, learn your shit, and then you can access that. So it was really interesting for me to sort of almost like hear these amazing references, like some of them super left, and some of them, like, on paper, if you looked at it, you'd kind of be thinking, oh, well, how does that relate to what we're doing right now? But
Mm,
I think for me, the challenge and what was interesting was like actually taking like the essence of that, and then maybe like translating that into something musical and putting it into our music. And I think I think that, yes, there's a quite a diverse kind of I guess range of, I don't know what you say, whether you say genres or like tempos or like beats. Do you know what I mean? I guess what I'm
mm,
saying is it's not an album of four to the floor, 128
yeah, yeah,
BPM. And I think, but I do think it is a snapshot of like your influences, which I think your music should be, right? Like, if you should sound like, in some ways, the people that you love, and I think you naturally will, whether you're
yeah.
trying to or not. And I think that's why when where we were sitting there and we were listening to all these amazing um bits of music, and then we would then go and like try and distill that, and then whatever we had, put it into
Mm.
the music that's on the album.
I think, yeah, no, and I think this is where kind of you and I just work together really well, apart from like obviously getting on personally and kind of having interest in each other's personal lives. But I think like that grew with time. But I think for me, it was like I know, like, I can play the keys to the level of like a 6-year-old child that's just started having lessons. And I've like managed to get by over the years with my club records, if you know what I mean. I've managed to like noodle around on the keys and kind of make bass lines and do all of that, so it works perfectly. But for me, it was like I always wanted way more of a musical aspect to my music, more on a song base, as of like a quintessential song base, and not just like pulling out samples here and there. I wanted like actual progression, and I wanted weird progressions that like my brain would never have been, it would never have happened. I'd still be writing the album now, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's kind of where it was perfect for us. It was like, I can show you a reference, or I can just be like, Mitch, just noodle around, just like play around. I
Yeah,
kind of am feeling this. You'd play something, and I'd be able to go, yeah, that's the one. Or maybe try the third chord a little bit different, or
exactly.
go down instead of up. And I think for the way it flowed, how we worked, it just worked really well. And I think having two worlds, you're like your jazz world realistically and your classical world kind of mixed in with what I'm bringing to the table. It there was it We weren't trying to write a dance record album,
Right.
in my opinion. We were just trying to write great records.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether that was a breakbeat record, or whether that was a 4/4, or whether that was a disco record, or whatever that was, or like an 80s 80s like big beat record, or whatever, I think we just wrote it. And it took time for us to get to a point where we had some finished records that sounded like an album. But I think there was some certain moments for me, especially, but I kind of want to ask you, is like, what was the moment, or was there ever a moment where you were like, yeah, this is the moment where it felt like an album can come out of this?
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like I'm trying to think, like going back chronologically. Like I said, I definitely felt like there was a point where I almost felt more relaxed, I guess, in the sense of like I know what it is now.
Yeah.
So that, when we were moving forward and we were, trying things out on newer records, it was almost like we knew that if we tried X, Y, Z that had worked in the past, there was a chance that like we were going to feel like that made sense. And that's not to say that we were like using any kind of formula, because I think you could tell from listening to the record that there's that, a lot of the records are quite different in the way that they sound.
Yeah.
There's hopefully a thread, obviously, but I think it's like we said, it's not like 12 like 130 BPM bangers. But I think once we'd sort of started to almost like learn the sounds that we were vibing with, because that's the thing. It's like if you've done this and you think it works and it's cool, then of course naturally, like when you try that again, there's a fairly decent chance that's going to resonate with you. And then I guess like almost by itself, then there becomes a sonic thread through the record, because like naturally you're gravitating towards the sound, which
Yeah.
will happen by itself. And then of course that then makes the album itself feel really together, and that it's come from the same place, as opposed to like an album of like 12 songs thrown together, which I'm sure
Yeah.
happens all the time. Like every record's produced by a different superstar producer, and like written in like different corners of the globe, like on these, like you see like songs that have got like 25 writers on. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
happens all the time, and I'm not saying that there's not amazing music that comes out of those sessions, but I guess
That was never the vibe we wanted to do. It was never for me, it was like, how can I build a crew around me that we're all tight and we can all enjoy this experience together? It makes the business side of it a little bit easier.
Yeah,
when it
for
all
sure.
comes down to it, because we've all enjoyed it and there's a passion for all of us behind it. And it's not just mine, it's everybody else's that's on the record. And I think that's the thing for me, is that's what I've always wanted from day one, is to kind of, this isn't just a Will Clarke project. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do this without anybody else on the project. So it's like, it's from the people running the studios, it's from the people singing, writing on the records, it's from you producing it, writing it, and then the mix guys and the mastering crew and the artwork, dude. Like, it's all for me, like, everyone, it's everyone's project. And that's
Yeah,
the thing for me. It was like,
but you know what,
how,
man? I will say, like, um, that's refreshingly rare, though, man. Like, and I think that's like a testament to you as a person, that like you have that generosity, because, like, I'm not any kind of veteran in the industry, but I guess what I would say, in the last like 5 years of doing this, that, and I don't know whether it comes from the artists, or whether it comes from the managers, or whether it comes from the labels, or what it is, but there have been instances for me, and I'm sure there's a million other producers and songwriters that have been in this position where, that you've kind of maybe even had to feel like you've got to fight even to justify your involvement,
yeah,
and that sucks, man. It literally sucks all the life and all of the fun and the passion out of it, and yeah, makes it really gross, So, and I think, and I think it can be short sighted, because then, like, invariably, like, do you want to then go and continue to collaborate with that person if it was an absolute headache, and like a really disgusting, like, nasty process to like try and work out who did what? Like, of course not, and it's a shame, because, like, there have been times, where maybe the actual creative musical aspect was actually really enjoyable and creatively fulfilling, but then it gets to that bit, and then it goes to shit, and it's like,
yeah,
right, well, this is dead in the water. Whereas I think, and which is short sighted, from a musical and a business perspective. But for you, I think, but I don't think this comes from, any other part other than just you being super safe and a kind, person, is that I think you have that generosity and fairness, where you're not afraid to credit the people that have contributed, and I think it just creates such a more enjoyable environment for everybody. It's like, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to pretend that I've done a record that I haven't. I don't get where that comes from. I wouldn't want to say I've produced something and then ask other producers to not to, like, can you guys not say, or you guys
yeah,
not say that you produced on that, please? Because and or like whatever it is, like, and it happens, I'm sure, all the time. But yeah, I think, for you went the total other way, like, and I think people, all of us, I can only speak for myself, it A, appreciate it, but B, will also like back you, and like are fucking super wanting to work with you more in the future, and it's like, yeah, let's go, let's keep going. This is album one, like, let's do album two, let's do album five, like,
yeah.
let's.
No, I think that, but that's the thing for me, is like, this industry's hard as it is, right? Like, you and I have these conversations probably on a bi-weekly bi-weekly moan,
Yeah,
where we're spending like 45 minutes just going, what the fuck is
yeah.
going on? But like, I think as artists, without sounding wanky, like, we have to fucking stick together.
Mm,
And it's like, this whole industry wouldn't be here if it wasn't for us.
mm,
Like, genuinely, like,
right,
take all the AI shit out, but generally, if it wasn't for us creating the music, there would be no music industry. And
right.
that is a fact, right? Like,
Yeah,
same with painters. Like, all of the people that make money out of painters wouldn't make money if there wasn't painters.
right.
And I think for me, it's like, I've seen it, right? I've had one of my records just taken away from me,
Mm,
and like, where, and then writers on that record say they produced it when I didn't even produce it. They didn't even produce it, but they're pushing for their name to be on producer credits.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, let's look after each other. Like, if we look after each other for the long term, like, if I win, everybody wins,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing is like, yeah, my goal is to be successful as an artist, but realistically, I want all my friends to be successful because I don't want to be the person that's winning out of everyone and then everyone else struggling after,
Right.
if you know what I mean. And I think that's the thing for me is like, how do and it was a part of the album process. I've always just written by myself over the years. It only kind of came until COVID where I started doing sessions
Yeah.
and wanted to change that. And it was like I gained so much more than worrying about the like the nitty gritty of the business side of it. I gain friends, I gain best memories and all of that. And realistically, like if the records don't do well, we've all had fun.
Right. And I say this like, unfortunately, like a lot because, as you said, industry's hard, man. And like, you know, working with artists, like some newer, some more established, doesn't really matter. Even, you know, there are people that have, like, I think we talked about this the other day, you know, artists that have like really got a serious profile. That, you know, there's times when even when they're dropping music, you know, and it actually is maybe, you know, not doing what people would expect. Anyway, it's really, what I'm saying is it's really easy to get kind of bogged down in the minutiae, like the numbers and the stats and all the rest of it. But you know, at least, you know, if you've enjoyed the process and ideally you love what you created, you know, like
Yeah.
you actually resonate with that music,
Mm,
then ultimately, of course, like you say, everyone wants it to be successful. Like we all want our music to be heard, and we want to try and make people feel something, and that's why we do it in the first place. Do you know what I mean? But
totally.
I think you can't, because there are so many variables, many of which are even out of our control.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we're setting ourselves up for a fall if we hang too much on, you know, the how many streams it got or how many playlists it got, or all the rest of it. Ultimately, if we can still pause and look back and think, right, did I enjoy that? Yes, it was fucking wicked. It was a great time in my life, and I have great memories. And B, like, would I listen to that? Hopefully, yes. Then it's like, okay, cool. Then keep
Yeah.
going, keep moving. Like, just keep creating music. There's a sick thing I saw from Disclosure like a few probably months back now, but it was like, I think people were kind of like grilling them or asking them, or, you know, is this the best music um you've ever heard made or whatever? And I can't remember which one of the boys it was, but they were like, this is the best that we could do right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's like the perfect answer. Do you know what I mean? It's like conceptually, people will compare music till the cows come home, and like, cool, like people can do that. But ultimately, like, you just gotta keep moving. You just gotta make what's in your heart. Try and enjoy it and keep moving. You know,
Yeah.
and that's it. You know, otherwise, what's the point?
Well, it's also like really hard. And I think let's use Disclosure for example, right? Like they've had their debut album was full of hits, right? Their
Incredible.
their second album was full of hits, but got massive like amount of people just talking shit on it because it wasn't the same as the first album.
Right.
But it was a different album. It was completely different and it was fucking genius.
Yeah.
But like, how do you even like when you're that young and that successful so young in a world of like how do you even comprehend to like move forward in that? And it's like how do you keep writing better records, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and I think you have to get to that point in your life where like these records are for you. And it sounds very Rick Rubin, but it's which is very easy for Rick to say that because he is obviously Rick Rubin, right? And there's only one Rick Rubin. But like it's if you think about the audience but whilst writing the record, it's never going to be finished.
Right.
Because I think like but look at even in the time we started writing the album to now when it's out, how the fuck does like how much has the industry changed?
Mm.
Like it's just like turned into complete nonsense in 2 years, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and I think if we try to write the record to fit at that time and then evolve the record because we're like, oh, we have to do a sped up version, we have to do this, we have to do this, like the album's just going to kind of recycle into something that just isn't what it started out to be and what it
yeah.
ended out to be.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, it happens a lot as well with, people obviously like viral stuff and people trying to chase trends and stuff. And it's like the wave's already, you're already behind it. If it's
Yeah.
happened and you're trying to copy something, like the horse is already bolted. Like you're already too late. And like,
Yeah.
again, like the disclosures thing, like that first album, like I remember that when that came out and it just like totally blew my mind. I was like trying to get into production at the time and like was doing more of the live thing at the time, like, touring and bits with artists and stuff. And I remember just listening to that and almost being like, oh man, like I need to go start again. Like this is a whole different level. But again, it was like they weren't, because it was album one, they were just making music that they thought was cool, I guess. And there was no kind of pressure, I guess, a lot of the time, for artists that do have I guess like a track record or like been in the business for a period of time. It's quite hard because I guess there's influences coming from other places, and like, you've got labels or, managers or whatever it is, and opinions, all presumably like trying to, impart like, good, helpful advice. But ultimately, people's intentions would often be different. It's like,
Yeah.
we talked about it briefly earlier where you were saying about like the most like some of those like references that you'd play of like some pretty left electronic music. It's like, right, well, you know, how do you measure success? Like what is success? Is it lots of streams? Is it if it makes you a fuck ton of money? Is it if you had an amazing time doing it? Or is it because it's a beautiful piece of, I
What is
guess.
it for you?
I think for me, the main reason I got into music, and still the bit I love the most about music, is just making people really feel something. And like, it's something that even when I was playing like fucking Debussy, or whether I was like playing like a ballad, a jazz ballad, or like trying to lay down something like for an electronic album, I think that at the core, I think that is, for me, it's the thing I love about music the most. I think is
Yeah.
its relentless power to almost immediately. And I can't remember who it was I heard discuss this once, but they were saying, even of all the art forms, I think music almost has the ability to like grab you and shake you more than others. It's like, of course you can, I guess, look at a painting on a wall and be moved by it, or see a dance, or whatever art form you're dealing with. But I feel like with those other art forms, maybe you almost need to put a little bit more in to get what you get out.
Yeah.
But with music, like, you can be sat on a train with headphones on, and like a piece of music can come on, and it can literally, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not the same for everybody, but I think people that are passionate about music, at least, but I would argue even people that are not, man, I think music can just profoundly just overwhelm you,
Yeah.
and I think that is, for me, it's like absolute superpower, like that, and that's what I love about it. So I think when I'm trying to make music, I think the thing where I would feel, I guess, the most above all, where I would feel it's been successful is, you know, like if people like, there's been a couple of times where I've had people kind of reach out and say like, oh, just so you know, like that really like hit me at a time in my life, and it like whatever, and I think if it can, if you can make people feel something, I think you're doing something right.
It's a great feeling, man.
Mm.
Um, at what point in your career life, I guess a bit of backstory on you realistically.
Mm.
was it at the age of 12 you went to boarding school to kind of?
Yeah, I think I was just 13 actually, only because like there's this hilarious documentary that was made about the show. I only know this because like it's been doing the rounds recently. Someone's converted it from VHS to YouTube.
Please send me that link.
No way, man. Loads of my
Please.
mates keep sending screenshots of my chubby little face. Sat like getting roasted on some Rachmaninoff or whatever. But yeah, I was just 13. And then went to Cheatham's up in Manchester to study classical piano at the time. Did the classical thing for years, and then kind of switched to jazz at sixth form, I think it was, and then and then kind of did the jazz thing at uni then. But I guess like I was just briefly mentioned before, it's like I guess the thing I always enjoyed was that, and because it doesn't really matter what the music is, it's irrespective of the kind of content.
Yeah.
I think it was always like the ability to kind of like try and move people, I guess, like
where did the production side of it come into though? Like what was it a business choice or was it a passion choice?
So weirdly, like even through like I've always been into dance music as well. Like house music, I guess, was when I was growing up was like my like go to. I don't know whether it was because there were like the elements of like soul and I guess soul jazz. Like you'd get parts of that I would gravitate towards. I don't know, but even through my time when I was studying classical piano, like was I've always like produced just but for fun. I did a music tech A level and produced on Cubase, like always made like dancey bangers like when I was like literally from like 12, 13, and then through my uni days, like I always kind of that was like, but it was just for fun, I guess. But I always produced yeah, like I even had a stab at DJing for a period when I was about 18, like, stood in my, like spaffed all of my student loan on like two CDJ 1000s and like just used to stand in my room in uni, just like playing like,
Playing to the thousands of people.
Yeah, playing to my wall, just like
the best time ever. They were the best time.
That's it, man.
I literally remember one of my best mates from school, like when like we must have been like 11, 12, maybe a bit older, 13, 14. And no, because I didn't have vinyl then. So it must have been younger. So it must have been like 12. And like I used to do like discos.
Yeah.
So I had these like CD decks. They weren't even CDJs. I think they were called like American DJ. Like they were all I could afford at the time.
Yeah, right.
And like mum and dad going out and my mate coming for like a sleepover and us just like in my room just smashing out like bangers.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, those times are the best.
Those are the times, man. Yeah. So like, so it's always been like my brother, even like you mentioned the vinyl thing, like, remember my brother having vinyl decks when he was like 16 and he's still super passionate about dance music now. Like that is like, so me and him, we always would go to raves and see DJs and so like outside of like my education and my career as a musician and as a performer, like I was very deeply interested in dance music and always had been. It was, I guess, after like I toured for a few years with different pop artists. So well, mainly Jessie Ware, who's amazing. Yeah. So after a few years on the road and doing that thing, I guess it was a case of maybe finding a way where I could be still making music, but actually be around a little bit more, I guess, was probably the fundamental thing. Like I was thinking about having a family, like me and my wife were kind of having those conversations, so that kind of came into that basically. And then I think it was when I was around 30 where I fully said, right, I'm gonna have a proper go at this.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, I'm gonna give myself 5 years basically, because I feel like a lot of the time these days, like people feel like there's like cheat codes and you can get there quickly and all the rest of it. It's like I remember saying like I'm gonna go at this like fully belting it out for 5 years, and if it's not happening by then, I'll maybe think that I should be doing something else.
And what point during that 5 years? Are we even at the 5 years yet?
Yeah, that it was basically when I turned 30. I'm like
Yeah.
coming up 37.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was basically when I was kind of about to have my daughter, I guess, like who's 5 now. We were at least like thinking about starting a family, and I just thought, right, you gotta you got to make shit happen. It's like you can't kind of expect there to be change without like actively going out and doing it. And also, like I say, the whole 5 year thing, I was like, sometimes like there can be an arrogance among some uh, session musicians or
Totally.
musicians on the whole, that like, oh, I can go and make a pop record. Listen to that pop record. It's only got 3 chords on it. It's fucking easy. It's bullshit. It's like, go on then, mate. When you're ready, I'll have 5. Thanks. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there is an art form, and yes, like there may not be complexity in some of the pop music that is obviously present in fucking Mendelssohn, but like I think the nuance is just in other places.
Yeah.
The detail is maybe not in the like difficulties of the harmony; it's somewhere else. So I kind of allowed myself enough time to kind of migrate across, and yeah, it was primarily a lifestyle choice, I would say. I love touring, I loved playing, I love being on stage, but yeah, I didn't want to be on the phone to my kids. I know that I found it really hard, like just purely selfishly, let alone
Yeah.
the effect that it might have had on them and my wife, and so yeah, it was kind of that. And I guess the context was because I had produced and loved producing like my whole musical career, even though it hadn't really seeped into what I was doing as my money making.
Yeah.
I knew that it was something that I loved, and I knew that it was something that I could do, that I'd done. It had just never, and like for years, my wife used to absolutely send you music out, and I would be like, no, and I'd never, for like 10 years, I'd never sent it to anybody. No one had ever heard anything that I'd ever done because I wasn't happy with the quality of it yet, and then it was actually Tommy Jules, who we mentioned earlier, that was really the catalyst in my career as a producer starting. So I'm eternally grateful to him for that, and I love him for that. And he gave me a chance and gave me a shot, and from there I kind of went to discover my now management and blah blah blah, and then the rest is
Rest
history,
is
as they say.
history.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's a process, and I think this is we live in a weird day and age where like we're being told in every way, shape, or form that it's an overnight success.
Yeah.
And it's just fucking not. It's really not. And it was weird. I was literally at the gym this morning and was like, can I even have a big record now? Like, I'm old. I'm not old, but I'm old as of the sense of how long I've been full time in this industry.
Right.
And not even full time, even part time. And I'm like, will the industry even let me have a big record?
Right.
If you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because you're like,
yeah, it's so weird.
because I think like we have this thing built up in our heads that like you have to be the fresh new thing.
Yeah.
Because that's what you hear about that's being successful, but then you forget how many years they've been grinding beforehand.
Yeah. It's not, it's like it's romanticized, It's like no one wants to hear the like, oh, that artist played loads of shitty open mics and had a really fucking
Yeah.
horrible time and dragged their gear to all of these awful shows that had a really tough time and blah 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 blah. That's not very sexy. You know what I mean? They want to hear
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like this like unsuspecting person just like suddenly woke up one day, opened their mouth and started fucking singing like an angel. It's like, well, I don't know if that was how it happened, but if that fits the story, then yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah, then go for it, man. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
I want to go back to the album. What was in your eyes, if you have one, was like the stickiest record for you, where it was like we actually had to put serious work in? I know completely off like straight away which one.
Are you gonna say You Alone?
No.
Right.
That one for me was fine.
I feel like we tried some bits on that though. I seem to remember us kind of trying different things. Like there were ones where we kind of set our path and that became it straight away, and then there were ones where like we'd kind of spend a few hours and be like, that's not it, and like have to almost go back to the beginning, and start again.
Mine, in my opinion, mine, and I don't want to put yours out there,
Influence.
but mine was Prey
Okay.
because
Yeah.
because we loved the song,
Yeah.
but obviously Escape had just come out with Halo.
Well, yeah, I think that's the annoying thing when there's a record like that, because it's like, again, I talked briefly about creativity earlier. It's like, I guess the optimal like environment for creativity is like no boundaries.
Yeah,
Like you're not trying to be like something, but you're also not trying to not be like something.
yeah,
You are just fucking being whatever it is that is right for that musical thing. Whereas, yeah, I guess there was that kind of not elephant in the room, but it was like I know consciously you were like, oh, I don't want it to feel like it's like that, or you were like wanting to like not distance yourself from it musically, but just make sure that there would never be an opportunity that someone could just say, oh, like you're trying to do this or you're trying to copy that, or like,
and I've had that already.
have you?
Yeah,
Oh, fucking hell! Right, take it off. We got to do it
wankers.
again. We got to do it again.
But I think that's the thing for me. It was like with a voice like Haley, there's her voice fits a certain sonic, right? Of record.
Yeah,
And it's like it's actually not the music around it, it's actually just her voice.
yeah.
Right. And obviously we've got Blythe to re-sing it. But yeah, that was the stickiest record for me.
It's hard, man. Like, because it's ultimately like when you're in a room and you're making musical decisions. It's like sometimes you can be faced with a situation where it's like, right, am I going to choose the thing that is the most like natural, like what feels like the correct musical decision to make for this situation,
Yeah.
or and this comes to the overthinking thing again. It's like, am I going to try and actively do something that is slightly different because it will like fulfill some purpose, i.e., make it different from something? It's like you can like purposely make something different from something else, but that might not be the correct musical decision to make in that moment,
100%.
right? And it's like sometimes it's walking that line. Like it's the whole like, oh, is this cool thing? It's like oh, is this cool though? It's like fucking hell, man. I don't know. Like, is this cool? Like you're like trying to like manufacture something because you think it might be like cool or different. And like, of course, like I'm not like saying that there isn't a place to like be innovative and to try new things, but ultimately I think if you're trying to be true to the music, you've got to like follow the path that it takes you on,
Yeah.
and I think anything that the mind comes up with conceptually is can be helpful, but ultimately I think you just got to follow the music, and it'll take you there, like, and I think like you say with someone like Haley, who's got such a amazing voice and tone and delivery and emotion, like naturally you want to wrap that in sympathetic like sounds and sonics
Yeah.
and feelings, and it's like, well, yeah, why did you do that? Because it fucking works, like,
Yeah.
and we could do something different. Would it work as well? Maybe not. Right.
Well, we
So
tried.
should we? Exactly.
We tried so much, and then every time we were like, fuck, we've got to go back. just
Right.
just purely because it was like, ah, this is good. Like I remember we tried to do a drum and bass version of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I think that's the way, though, right? Is like you got to try these things,
Yeah.
but ultimately, like the end question is like, is this better than the other thing?
Yeah.
And like, and when I know obviously better, there is, it's probably a better word there, but what I mean is like, is this musically, doing more than what the other thing is?
Yeah.
Is it creating a more powerful piece of music, or is it maybe just like doing a job, i.e., like making sure that it's not like that,
Mm.
or being different? I think you've got to try and do both. I think the people that do different the best is the people that do it in a natural, spontaneous way. I think
Yeah.
the minute that you're really trying to like think, oh, I'm gonna like do something different, I think that can often just feel contrived. And I think whether the listener knows it or not, I think it can feel inauthentic. So I think, like I say, I'm not trying to, like, I'm all for like being out the box and like trying random shit. And fuck, we did plenty of that on this
Yeah.
album, but what I feel like when we did that on this album, and creatively it felt fun and flowed, like I mentioned at the beginning. I think it was that moment where you'll do something and you kind of know it,
Yeah.
like you hear a sound, or like it can sometimes be a fucking happy accident. It is plenty, and I love when that happens. It can be a patch on a keyboard, it can be a mistake, but like when it happens, it's like you feel it in the room. Like there must have been plenty where me and you probably even like did that and looked at each other,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, fuck, right, let's go, let's run in that direction, And I think that should kind of be the way that it happens, like your heart is almost making the decisions, and your head is maybe like presenting you with the different options. Oh, try this, or try this chord. Oh, like let's open the filter. No, like, and that's why I love working with DJs. Like, you touched on it earlier, like me and you working well together. I think because I come from like the place of like learning the theory and getting all of that stuff together, which is fine. There's no like right or wrong way, but that sometimes can actually act as a bit of a hindrance sometimes to like really being able to have the laser focus on what it's to be. Because I guess sometimes you feel like, oh, or you could try this, or you could try this, or you sometimes feel like you maybe have too many options at your disposal, and it's quite hard to lock down something. Whereas like with you, I play something, I might play 10 things, and then you'll go, oh, stop that one. And it's like
Yeah.
wicked. And I fucking love that, because it's like, there's like, it's everything that I feel like I miss when I'm in the studio. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll get to thing 100 and then be like, oh, I didn't like any of those. What the fuck? I think I'll go and get lunch. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like working with you, and particularly people that know what they want. Like I mentioned Jessie earlier. I learned so much from working with Jessie. She's got incredible taste, and she knows what she wants. And like I would play stuff, and like she'd be like, oh, she'd be really matter of fact. I love Jessie for this. She'd be like, don't play that, babe, sounds shit. And like young, like 24-year-old me, I was like, oh my God. But it's amazing. Like it was just such a laser focus on like, no, when something's right, and you're the same in that way, so that like it can just be a case of, right, you just fire patches at me, and like I'll just play ideas, because for me a sound will instruct an idea, and
Yeah.
then I'll come with an idea, and then you're like overseeing, you're like curating the ideas based on your taste and what you want it to sound like. So for me it's like a perfect melting pot for like a creative environment.
No, I
And I
agree.
feel like that's how most of the record came together, really, was that like you saying, yeah, no, like, no, that, like, yeah, try that, right, let's run with that, like, and then
Yeah.
we'd get into it.
And it would all swing once we got that initial thing. It would all come around pretty quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
I know it literally, I gave myself a year to write it and complete it. It was April to April, and
Right.
although it was finished in April, minus a few re-sings and stuff like that and mix
Yeah.
downs, but like realistically, we probably only spent like time wise a month on it to
Oh yeah, yeah,
like
yeah. If you
from writing
counted the
sessions. Yeah,
days, yeah. If you counted the days, yeah. And yeah, like you say, I'm from writing, and like there's a bunch of like amazing top lines, and even like finished records that like didn't end up on the album, and
yeah.
mainly because maybe they just didn't sonically
Sonics. Yeah.
necessarily fit the overall aesthetic. And it's
Mm,
like you could even say that there could be like better records, that, but it's like, but
100%.
but when you're creating like a whole, it's like things have to be sympathetic to each other, and like
Yeah.
that was it really interesting, for me. And I'd never kind of like made decisions in that kind of macro way before. Like when you're making singles or you're making
It's
just records and
easy.
standalone, all your focus is make this the best it can be, irrespective of any other
Mm,
shit, which is fine. But like sometimes, I guess if you're then making something that is part of a body of work, there are the considerations, and that is,
yeah.
like, will this work together as a bigger knit of music? And like for me, again, that's the pinnacle of like, albums where it feels like, you press play on the first track and like it arcs you all the way to the end, man. I feel like that's like the absolute pinnacle of
Perfect.
like
Yeah.
art. Yeah, like when you're making of recorded music is like when you feel like you just enter a journey and like and it just takes you all the way to the end and you're like, fuck. It's almost like one piece of music, you know, start
Yeah.
to finish.
I agree.
Um
Is dare I say it? Do you have a fave?
oh, man, it's so hard. It's so hard. Like Summit is special for me just because
Yeah.
I just never in a million years would have said that that was how that record would sound. Um, you know, so you know those records where I feel like creatively we kind of push the envelope maybe a little bit in terms of it kind of not fitting a mold exactly, but I don't know. Yeah, I honestly can't pick, man, because
Mm.
they are so different as well. Like the tracks, like there are ones that there are tracks that do things that others don't. You know, so um,
It's a tough one.
yeah,
I go through different phases of favorites,
exactly right. Yeah,
but
um,
I think for me, Need Some Time is still my ultimate.
yeah,
That
yeah.
that was the moment for me when I was like, okay, we've got an album coming together.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, the whole like using an effect or like doing a process to, to sculpt a kind of what becomes a sound of an album. And like, to be fair, one thing I think that did have an influence was actually the Teletone audio
Massively.
thing that we bought. Like and
Scarb.
Scarbo, yeah. Like I mean, a lot of the pads and things on that record, are from that library, and they just it just really suited the kind of feel that we were going for. Do you know what I mean? So that
Well,
was quite interesting.
it's it it's like, although it is a soft synth, it sounds, they all of the records sound like out of tune, fucked up hardwares.
Yeah, and that's what they do amazingly. Really, is like that the Teletone stuff they get that grit that a lot of the software synths miss because it's
Yeah,
digital. Obviously, there isn't the imperfection that is that little 1% that we all feel when we listen to analog shit. But yeah, I think you just kind of sometimes have to be a little bit more creative on the back end when you are working with software. But like, fuck me, these days, like there are so many incredible ways you can
so
do
much.
that. And I think
Yeah,
with it's all really knit into that Teleton stuff. And like, I feel like when we were like like searching through the patches on that, we were just I felt like it was creatively, it was really like hitting the button quite
agreed.
quickly.
Yeah,
I think that's the speed thing. I mentioned it again. I think like creativity and speed are so closely related, and not in the sense that like you want to get there quickly because you're in a hurry, but mainly because it's like sometimes slowing down can mean that your conceptual mind gets involved a little bit too much, and the
totally.
minute you're thinking too much, like you're not feeling enough, and that can send you in a different direction. So I think if you can sometimes pull a patch up and it's instantly like hitting your feels like and you're just running with something, I think that's going to create something infinitely more authentic than if you've like agonized for 3.5 hours on whether the snare drum is the right fucking snap. Do you know what
And
I
I
mean?
and I think like listening to a lot of like interviews, speaking to a lot of people that write music, also having mates that make music, and I feel like it's literally the same in every, not every, there's outliers, but in every record that has an extreme feeling that you can't explain,
Yeah.
it always, for me, in my opinion, comes from something that's just like happened in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And without going full hippie, like it's that shit that we
Go
can't.
full
Well,
hippie.
it's the shit that we can't like words. Like words don't get close to it. That's the thing.
No.
Words are actually a really shitty, poor substitute. Like you can't really describe the best things about music and art using words.
Yeah.
They don't do it justice. Everything that amazing shit that we all feel is beyond. It's trans.
Yeah.
It's transcendent. It comes from somewhere else, and
Mm.
that's what I mean about like the minute we're thinking and trying to use our minds to figure it out. immediately we're potentially veering away from like where the gold is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the holy grail is like using both in tandem, in conjunction. And like fuck, the best people that make the best art are the people that are able to utilize that the most. Like having some knowledge of how to be it on technology or be it sitting down, being able to play like every like jazz chord in the world, or Rachmaninoff. There has to be a craft, but there also has to be an ability to access what is beyond like concepts and science and theory, and
I
I
think it's
think
also having the ability to just know and
right.
have that feeling. Like I think that's kind of where we get the like exec producer role, right? Where you can have that person like, and I think all real bands, real artists, real masterpieces have that.
Yeah,
If you know what I mean, there's always somebody that's in the back of the room that goes, guys, that's the fucking one.
100%.
And I think that kind of gets lost nowadays, in
Yeah,
especially. I don't know in the band world because I've never really been in it, so I can't comment on that. But I feel like in the pop world, in the electronic world, especially in the more commercial records,
yeah,
I feel like it everything's way too influenced.
yeah. And I think potentially technology has had a big role to play, like when you've got a door that you can have 500 tracks and you've
Yeah,
got infinite possibilities, you've got infinite different sounds at your disposal, you've got fucking splice and you've got all the different options. It's like it's quite hard to commit because ultimately in your mind you've always got that thing of like, oh, but is there a better option, like, or
yeah,
what if? And I think that can actually really like oppose, because sometimes in instances where I've gone, I'm just going to put this down, and in my head I tell myself it's fine, I'm going to replay it later, so don't worry. And then I play it, I'm not thinking about it too much, I'm just feeling it and I'm natural in the moment. And then lo and behold, like you're
it's the
fine.
best.
You're feeling like later on any of the imperfections or whatever it is, you're like, like that's it. Like I can't
Yeah,
change that. I don't want to change that. If I change that now, it would rip the fucking soul out of what the like absolute nucleus of the whole thing is. So it's like, so sometimes I do that on purpose, like kind of tell myself, oh, I'm gonna put this down now, like, or like, of course it happens vocals all the time. It's like, oh, just grab an SM7, right? Just sing it in now, or we'll do a proper vocal session later on like a nice £5,000 mic, and it's just like, no, man, like
doesn't work.
that was it, like that was it, and it was it because you weren't fucking thinking about it.
It
You were
was
just
when
doing it.
I recorded "Holding On" with Charlene Hector.
Oh,
It was Charlene in the room. It was Charlene, Josephina, and Marco, and like we'd written the hook of "Holding On," and everyone had sung it, right? And then I was just like, like me and Charlene have like had like history before. We've worked on a lot of records before. She's re-sang a lot of records for me, and she knows my love for Aretha Franklin. And
yeah,
I was just like, Charlene, can you just fucking channel your inner Aretha and just go ham? And like, I don't want you to write lyrics. Like, just record a minute of you just based on what the lyric, what we've just sung, but
yeah,
can you just go and record to that,
yeah,
like
yeah,
with no music to it, nothing, just like
yeah,
go in.
yeah,
And we were all just in the room, just like watching her just belt, and we were just like, who is this woman? This is
yeah.
like,
Superhuman.
and for me, like as a part of the record, like we we were confused of like, or I was confused of like, should this just be a standalone, and then should the Holding On come after that and be a completely separate record?
Yeah,
And then I was like, actually, no, it all just works as a record, and
yeah.
that is a perfect example. Is like if we went and recorded that again,
Ah,
it wouldn't have been the same.
no. And it's funny. This just reminded me about how we kind of did that in the room. As I remember when we came to like produce that. Like
Yeah,
I remember you playing me that Charlene piece of fucking absolute genius. and being like, and desperately want, as a pianist who like used to, is used to accompanying singers and all the rest of it. Like we kind of did it. We got a nice patch that we were into, and then like I like almost like followed her, like in a way that was obviously hopefully musically, sympathetic to what she was doing, and tried to like follow her melodies with chords and things. And it was just a really interesting way to kind of to do it, like because you, like when does that happen anymore, like but
Yeah.
like so because and the beauties of course is like you've given her total freedom, like
Yeah.
no click in your ear, no like pianist like shoving a chord down your throat so you got to sing this. It was like just
Go.
connect and go, and like she's one of the friggin' greatest voices in this country. So like, I mean, yeah, like she just goes and it feels amazing.
Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
was.
I love that there's stuff like that on there though, man. Because like, yeah, it just kind of, yeah, it just keeps it interesting.
Mm,
It's fun to, and that's another one where like, I guess it's pretty gnarly when it kind of
polar
gets
opposites.
going. Yeah, but it's just like that that's the spectrum, isn't it? Like
Well, I think that was always the thing going into a session, that it was always, and I remember saying this in multiple sessions, the goal is we all have fun, and the
mm,
goal is to make people like cry,
yeah,
right? And I think that was it, is like, how can we like, and I don't mean that to make people cry in like a negative or a positive way. It was like, just how do you evoke the strongest feeling as human beings we possibly can feel.
yeah, yeah,
And like when we're crying, we're in that kind of heightened emotion of like at all times. And
yeah.
I think, yeah, she fucking nailed it.
Man, no doubt. Like, yeah. As soon as I remember you playing me that and just being like,
Okay.
right, okay,
And
like,
we could have just left it.
yeah,
We
yeah.
could have just
Oh,
left
and
it.
like that it carries because it's done with such conviction. And again, I come back to the whole like thing about mastering your craft as well. Like, like I mean, I don't know Charlene's history personally, but like
Yeah.
sometimes you can tell that like she knows what she's doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel confident that I can say like she is an unbelievably accomplished vocalist
Yeah.
who can absolutely execute at the highest level, and that bit of singing that you hear there is somebody that can absolutely do that. And I think when you start with like raw materials that are that strong, like the rest is easy. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like because you don't have to try very hard,
Mm,
like because the body of it is just there. All you're doing is like almost window dressing around it to be like everything else is going like, look how fucking great this is. Like listen to that,
yeah.
And as a producer, I think like when you're doing that, like that's kind of your best thing is like best foot forward. And like when she recorded that, it's like, well, there's your best foot forward. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. We can just work around it and kind of try and,
Which had fun. Like it was just fun. And
yeah,
where we ended up, obviously, the record is like it was
mad.
quite. We would, yeah. It's like just fucking around, like just being really creative and just having fun, But
Well,
like still,
I remember it was like, okay, we've made Summit, and Holding On came towards the end of the writing process,
right.
and I remember we made Summit, and we were like, can we top that? can
Yeah,
can we make the drop grosser? And like,
yeah. More carnage.
I remember playing it to one of my friends in Detroit, and we were driving back from Toronto, and I was like, oh, do you want to hear the album? And she was like, yeah. And then Holding On came on. And she was like, wow, this is beautiful. And then it dropped in, and she's like, what the fuck is this?
Oh
Absolute
man.
gross.
And I love that when you said like you played it to Charlene, like that you like she's absolutely vibing with it as well. Because
Yeah.
like sometimes if you don't know the person, and I don't know personally, like obviously I've had a few like Zoom sessions and stuff. I know of her,
Mm.
like and mutual friends and musicians and stuff. But you never know. Like I was hoping she wasn't going to be like, what have you done? Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you make all that mad ravey noise around my beautiful singing? But yeah, I think I would like to think that in the like bookends of like how the record is, you can't. There's space for like honoring what it is,
Yeah.
and then you kind of earn the license to like
Go ham.
go to fucking crazy town. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Love it. Dude, we've just done over an hour, and I know we could probably talk about this for fucking more and more hours. But like, first of all, I just want to like thank you for everything you've done on the album, man. Like,
Oh,
genuinely, it's been so much fun. Like, not even on a musical level, on a personal level, and I cannot wait to do it again. And I know we've got sessions booked in, and
yeah, man.
album 2 is going to start, and whatever album 2 even comes out like. But I know we're just going to have fun and make the most of it. So,
Yes,
dude,
sir.
thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, dude. Like, and like I say, like likewise, man. Thanks for having me involved. Like, it's been a vibe, and like you know, more is more.
Mitch Jones Music on social media.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mitch Jones music. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sweet, man.
yeah, yeah. Wicked. All right,
Big
dude.
love. See you soon.
Yeah, take it easy, man.
Thanks,
Nice one,
mate.
dude. See you in
Peace.
a bit.
And that's a wrap. Big love to everybody listening. If you liked this episode, please share it. Please give us a comment. Subscribe. I love you all.